Penn State just landed a wall at offensive tackle.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting, and I guess it's a triple feature at this point with the regular episode, Jackson Ford, and now the latest offensive tackle to commit to Penn State's class of 2026. As always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show. We are talking about the latest commitment here and now how it impacts the class of 2026. And this is three-star, more of a consensus three-star. ESPN does have him as a four-star offensive tackle. His last name is pronounced like books. This is Jack Fuchs out of the state of Tennessee, and he is a mountain. He is a wall, 6'8", 290 pounds, and he is going to be a developmental prospect. This isn't somebody that's going to come in right away and expect him to start in the first couple of seasons. Obviously not as a true freshman there. He will most likely go through the red shirt, but I give him due time, a Trautwein to work with him. And I got to immediately say, I don't necessarily like player comparisons, but he has a similar developmental track to a Nolan Rucci, where he carries his frame very well. And I know there were some questions about his measurables and things like that. That's why this commitment took a while, because I know that Fuchs was very interested in Penn State, and Penn State was interested in him, but they had to get him on campus for some visits and everything and do some testing. And once everything cleared, it made sense for Penn State to take this commitment. So this is another player where he's going to be characterized as a diamond in the rough if he develops correctly. You can't teach 6'8", nearly 300 pounds going into his senior season. He will have to add the weight. But for somebody that does have this kind of frame, he moves exceptionally well. He is a mauler in run blocking. The biggest question about him is technique, pass protection, footwork, those kinds of things, because all of his high school film is pushing everybody out of the way at left tackle. I imagine he's going to convert to right tackle. That's why I say he reminds me so much of Nolan Rucci, because Rucci played left tackle in high school, was able to just move people effortlessly because of the size, the frame, the strength, and the speed and the acceleration. Because I expected, when I turned on the tape, I was expecting Fuchs to be a little slow to the punch, that, okay, he just relies on his strength and his build to move players out of the way. No, he's got a quick first step. He's the one that's setting the tempo. So I really enjoyed watching what he brings to the football field as someone that's more than just a big body. He is an avid run blocker, but that's really it. The high school team just runs a lot. They run their way to victory, and that's fine. So the biggest question mark is going to be, how will he hold up in pass protection? But give him time to develop. You can teach him the technique. You can teach him the footwork. You can't teach 6'8", 290 right out of the gate. And I imagine that he'll eventually be 300 in due time by the time he is finished with his senior season. They land him out of the state of Tennessee. Other offers included the likes of South Carolina. I would say the major players in this recruitment were Penn State, Kentucky, and Indiana. Nebraska as well. He actually took multiple visits to Nebraska, but primarily I think Kentucky and Indiana were the schools that Penn State was able to fend off here. And his father, Scott, is the assistant offensive line coach with the Tennessee Titans. So there is football DNA right here with Jack. So high football IQ, you know that you're going to get the work ethic. So why not take this commitment? Because if he's willing to put in the 3 years plus that it's going to take to reach his full potential, then these are the kinds of prospects that I want Penn State to have in its class. Not somebody that isn't looking long-term. Like James Franklin said, he still wants to be a transformational program rather than a transactional program. And this is one of those players where if he's willing to put in the time and the effort and the commitment, that Phil Trautwein in due time, I mean, look how quick of a turnaround. Now, Nolan Rucci had spent a couple of years in college, don't get me wrong, but Nolan Rucci had a little bit of a delay in his development. You can get Fuchs right on the right track and get him on that similar trajectory where the technique just comes along in the middle of the season. So I was really impressed with the way that Trautwein was able to take Rucci and really improve him and have him live up to that 5-star potential. And I don't mean to put those expectations on Fuchs right out of the gate like that, but in terms of size, what he's already good at, things that, hey, I remember watching Rucci's high school film, and it's very reminiscent of what I'm watching here right now. So that's why I can't but help make this player comparison, because it does feel very necessary. So a lofty ceiling if you can get him to clean up whatever pass blocking technique there is, because I don't know that there is any at this point in time. But the athleticism, he's not just a big body. He's not just a massive frame. He is somebody that can move. He pulls. He's able to down block. He's able to zone block. He's able to do a lot of things in the run blocking scheme. The big question mark is pass blocking. I imagine that eventually he will convert to right tackle. He's currently playing left tackle, and Penn State gets a player that you can be optimistic about. Certainly has the intangibles to be a talented player, but this is going to be a long-term outlook here. Probably year 3 is when I would expect him to turn the corner. And this is right after Penn State picks up Jackson Ford. So we're going to talk big picture again to go along with Fuchs here in the class of 2026. Now, what is the outlook? Because we go from back to 20 commits to 21 to now 22 for Penn State. What is the Nittany Lions outlook now, landing a defensive end and an offensive tackle in the same day? That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to get tickets for all kinds of events, whether that's sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it. It is baseball season, summertime. So get this, prices on the Gametime app actually go down as it gets closer to game time, as it gets closer to first pitch. So if you're looking to score some incredible deals on baseball tickets this summer, you choose Gametime. And I think one of the best features about Gametime, I've used it for myself, is that Gametime lets you see your point of view ahead of time. So there's no second guessing, there's no wondering, especially when you've never been to a venue, a stadium, a ballpark before. That really comes in handy. And you can get Penn State football tickets on Gametime. So if you're looking to get tickets ahead of time, choose Gametime, and you can get those seat views in Beaver Stadium, especially if you've never been there before. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That is LOCKEDCOLLEGE, Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I highly encourage everybody to go check out my preview of Jackson Ford. And I think this commitment did catch me slightly off guard because there was anticipation for Jackson Ford. There was steam. There was intel that said, hey, Penn State's going to land its first defensive end here in the class of 2026. And like I talked about with Fuchs, is that Penn State did want him. They just needed some confirmation on his measurables. And not to draw a comparison to Abdul Carter, who's a completely different player, completely different expectations in terms of his development when he was at Penn State. But the Nittany Lions weren't ready to take him until he went through that additional testing. So that's why these visits are so important, especially if they're out of state. I mean, Carter was in Pennsylvania and they still said, hey, we want to see you for some additional testing, some measurables, that kind of thing. Same thing, same case goes for Fuchs. If you did miss the episode on Jackson Ford and you're tuning in for this one about the mountain of a man that is Fuchs, Jackson Ford, 6'4" defensive end, roughly 6'3.5", 6'4", 240 pounds, moves very well for that size, has very good speed. I like as a pass rusher, that is his forte, which is what Penn State's going for there with defensive end. But this combination of size and speed, relatively college-ready size. You put on 10 more pounds if you're Ford, that's where Penn State wants him to be in that 250. Maybe they bump him up to 260. I could see him as a strong side defensive end. Wouldn't surprise me if he played either side, weak side where Abdul Carter was, or strong side where Dennis Sutton was. He does already have that larger frame. Ford does. So do not be surprised if he is that Dennis Sutton or takes that kind of developmental path where he adds maybe 20 or 25 more pounds to play that side of the defensive line. But now you get 2 commitments. So the thumbnail, I caption it as momentum shift, because Penn State has taken a lot of hits on the recruiting trail here between Notre Dame and Michigan. And now you win Ford's recruitment, even though he's in state. That was a difficult recruitment. You had Ohio State in there. You had Michigan in there. You had Wisconsin in there. This was an all Big Ten battle between Penn State and other relevant foes. And Ford could have easily gone anywhere. Ohio State was making a late push. It sounded like Michigan was initially this leader when things really took off here in the summer. And Penn State was able to fend them all off at the end of it. Wisconsin was kind of a late riser. It seemed like everybody was taking a lead in this recruitment, and Penn State stayed consistent. So kudos to Deion Barnes for getting his first defensive end commit in this class of 2026. So now, as it stands, Penn State has 22 commitments in this class, and they're pretty balanced everywhere. Now, I used to say, okay, 2 quarterbacks. Well, they don't have 2 quarterbacks anymore, but you're starting to add your offensive linemen. You get a defensive end to make it 3 total defensive linemen. They're projected to land Tyson Harley fairly soon. Again, projected. It's not a guarantee, but that's good news. That's good intel, right? They have a running back. They have multiple wide receivers. They now have 4 offensive line commits in total. Again, headlined by Kevin Brown, who should be a 5-star sooner rather than later. The reason he's not is because he was injured his junior season of high school. And he continues to go to these showcases. You can see it on full display why he should be a 5-star. They're loaded at defensive back. 6 defensive back commits, potentially could add another in theory. They have 3 linebacker commits. I would still say that it would pay off for Penn State to try to add another offensive lineman, definitely another defensive end, maybe 2. If you can find a way to come from behind in this Carter Meadows recruitment, because I can't imagine that Penn State is leading right now. I would say that's either Michigan or Ohio State. But if you can pull off a surprise there, add another offensive line commit, ideally 5-star Emmanuel Iheanacho, easier said than done. This class really does check all the boxes that Penn State wanted to. Now, they didn't get the premier prospects, the elite targets that they were pursuing. And that's understandable, and that's the frustration, and it's why this cycle has truly been a roller coaster. I do believe that has to do a lot with the fact that NIL has taken a hit because of roster retention and the additions they made in the transfer portal. That is going to cost you hefty NIL. So Penn State seemed pretty willing to not give up, but give ground on the 2026 class in hopes that they get a national title for this upcoming season. That's the plan here. Let's see if it all pays off in the end. But Penn State does add not 1, but 2 commitments in the same day at position groups of need with where they are in the 2026 cycle. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host as always. Thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. And if you're not one, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.